I've cremated over 2,000 people in that retort. 2,000, and I stopped counting after the Kendrick thing. Doesn't matter. Point is, I know what bone fragments weigh. I know what 6 pounds of calcium phosphate looks like sitting in a stainless steel cooling pan. I know the difference between a heavy return and a wrong return. What came out of the Kendrick cremation was wrong. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter. My funeral home was in the Oklahoma Panhandle, little town, 1,500 people, maybe less now. The building used to be a feed store back in the 40s. My father converted it in 58. Concrete block walls, flat roof, no windows in the back half where the prep room was. He ran it until 91. I took over and put in the crematory that same year. Brand new retort, natural gas, everything up to code. State inspector signed off on it. I was 26 years old and thought I'd run the place forever. 33 years I operated that crematory. 70, 80 cremations a year. Every single one I logged by hand in a green ledger book. Date, decedent name, body weight at intake, cremation start time, end time, return weight. I kept those books on a shelf above the arrangement desk. 28 volumes by the time I was done. Dale Kendrick came in on a Tuesday, October. I remember the wind because the panhandle wind in October sounds like someone dragging sheet metal across a parking lot, and it had been going for 3 days straight. Kendrick was 62, retired grain elevator operator, died at the county hospital in Guyman, cardiac arrest, nothing unusual. His son in Tulsa called to make arrangements. Direct cremation. No viewing, no service, no embalming. The son wired the payment and said he'd pick up the urn when he could get down from Tulsa. That was it. Transport brought Kendrick in Monday afternoon. I did the intake myself. Always did. I checked the death certificate against the hospital ID band. Dale Raymond Kendrick, date of birth matched, social matched. I wheeled him onto the platform scale. 242 pounds. Big man, thick through the chest and shoulders. Grain elevator work does that to you. I wrote it in the ledger, moved him to the cooler. Tuesday morning, 7:15, I loaded him into the retort. Cardboard alternative container, which is what you use for direct cremations. It's basically a heavy cardboard box. Looks like what a refrigerator comes in. I slid the container onto the retort floor, closed the door, set the temperature, and hit the ignition. You hear the gas catch, then the roar. 1,800 degrees. The building vibrates a little when the retort's running full. You get used to it. I went to the front office and did paperwork. Normal Tuesday. At 10:40, the cycle completed. I let the retort cool for 20 minutes, then opened the door and raked the remains into the cooling pan. This is the part I need you to understand. I've done this over 2,000 times. I know what a cooling pan looks like after a standard adult cremation. The bone fragments spread out, white and gray, maybe some larger pieces from the femur or skull that didn't fully calcine. For a man Kendrick's size, I'd expect 5 to 7 pounds of processed remains after I run them through the cremulator. The pan was too heavy. I knew it before I even moved it. The way it sat on the rails, the way it pulled on my arms when I slid it out, there was too much material. I processed the remains through the cremulator anyway. Ground everything down to the uniform consistency that goes into the urn. Poured it into the container, set it on the scale, 14.2 pounds. I stared at the number, took the container off, re-zeroed the scale, put it back on, 14.2. I checked the retort, opened the door, got on my knees with a flashlight, looked at every inch of the interior. Clean. No residue from a previous cremation, no debris, no contamination. I checked the cooling pan. Clean. I checked the cremulator. Clean. 14.2 pounds came out of a man who should have produced 6. I set the container on the shelf in the processing room. I wrote the number in the ledger, and I sat there looking at it. because in 33 years, I had never seen a return weight more than double what the body should produce. The math doesn't work. You put organic material into 1800 degrees for 3 hours, and physics gives you calcium phosphate andite fragments, not 14 pounds of it. I locked up that night and drove home. I didn't sleep. I kept seeing the number in the ledger, 14.2, written in my own handwriting, like every other entry, except every other entry made sense. Next morning I went back in early, before sunrise, sat in the processing room with the container and a flashlight and a clean stainless steel tray. I poured out a small sample of the cremated remains and spread them thin under the light. Most of it looked normal. Calcium phosphate fragments, processed fine, the standard gray-white powder you'd expect. But mixed in, maybe 30% of the volume, there was something else. Denser, slightly off-white, almost yellowish. It had a different texture between my fingers, grittier, like powder-dyed chalk. And there was a smell. Not the normal calcium dust smell. Something chemical. Faint, like old adhesive. Like a medicine cabinet that hasn't been opened in 40 years. I called Ray Dillard at the State Cremation Board. Ray had been in the business as long as me. I told him I had a return that weighed 14 pounds on a 240 body, and I couldn't explain it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked if I'd had the retort serviced recently. I said yes, annual inspection, passed fine. He asked if I'd done a test burn. I said no. He said he'd never heard of a return that heavy, and maybe my scale was off. My scale wasn't off. I'd weighed the Kendrick container 3 times. I took the sample to a lab in Oklahoma City. Guy I knew from a continuing education seminar, a forensic chemist who did work for the medical examiner's office. I told him I had an anomalous cremation return and asked if he could tell me what the extra material was. He said give him a week. While I waited, I did what I should have done the night before. I went to the ledger books. 28 green ledgers on the shelf above the arrangement desk. Every cremation I'd ever performed, dated and numbered. I pulled all of them down, stacked them on the arrangement table, and started going through the return weights. I had a yellow legal pad and a calculator. I wrote down every entry, date, body weight, return weight. At first I was looking for other high returns. Anything above 8 pounds. There were a few, 9.1, 8.6, but nothing like 14. Nothing that jumped out. I almost stopped there, almost put the books back and waited for the lab. But then I did something I'd never done before. I sorted by day of the week. I don't know why. Maybe because Kendrick was a Tuesday, and I was looking for Tuesdays. I separated all my entries into 7 columns on the legal pad, Monday through Sunday, wrote down every return weight in the right column, and the Tuesdays were heavy. Not 14 pounds heavy, not obviously wrong, but consistently across 28 years, the average return weight for a Tuesday cremation was 2.1 pounds heavier than any other day. Monday average 5.8, Wednesday 5.6, Thursday 5.9, Saturday 5.7, Tuesday 7.9 every year for 28 years, roughly 1,500 Tuesday cremations. Every single year, Tuesday ran heavy. I checked if maybe I tended to cremate larger people on Tuesdays. No pattern. Body weight distribution was random across all days. I checked if the retort ran at different temperatures on Tuesdays. I'd logged gas pressure and peak temperature for every burn since 2004. No variation. Same gas line, same pressure regulator, same thermocouple. The machine didn't know what day it was. Neither did the gas company. But Tuesday was heavy, and it had been heavy since 1991. The lab called on a Friday. The chemist, his name was Auerbach, asked me if I was sitting down, which is the kind of thing people say in movies, but when a forensic chemist says it to you on the phone, it doesn't feel like a movie. The excess material was calcium hardite compound, a calcium powder mixed with formaldehyde resin. It was used as an embalming hardening agent. You'd pack it into the abdominal cavity or around facial features to maintain structure during viewing. A company called Parlor Chemical Supply made it out of St. Louis. They went out of business in 1978. Dale Kendrick was never embalmed. I need to say that again. Dale Kendrick was a direct cremation. He went from the hospital cooler to my cooler to the retort. No prep room, no chemicals, no trocar, no arterial injection. I transferred him myself. Nobody else touched him. I asked Auerbach if he was sure. He said he'd run it twice. Calcium hardite, a compound that hasn't been manufactured in over 40 years, coming out of a retort that was installed in 1991. I hung up the phone and I went to the back office, to the filing cabinet my father left behind. My father's filing cabinet was a gray steel 4-drawer that had been in the back office since before I was born. Bottom drawer was supply records, invoices, receipts, order forms going back to 1958. I pulled the whole drawer out and set it on the floor. It took me 2 hours to find what I was looking for. Parlor Chemical Supply invoices. My father had ordered calcium hardite regularly between 1961 and 1977. 10-pound cases, sometimes 2 at a time. I stacked the invoices on the desk and added up the quantities. 2,800 pounds, give or take. Over 16 years, my father had purchased approximately 2,800 pounds of calcium hardite compound. Every ounce of it went into the bodies he embalmed, bodies that were buried, in caskets, in the ground, at the cemetery on the east edge of town, or shipped out to family plots across the panhandle. None of them were cremated. My father didn't have a crematory. Before I installed the retort in '91, cremations were outsourced to a facility in Amarillo. My father buried people. That's what small-town funeral directors did. Almost nobody chose cremation. So the calcium hardite went into the ground with those bodies, sealed in caskets, buried under 6 feet of red Oklahoma clay. I sat there with the invoices fanned out on the desk and the legal pad with my Tuesday weight averages next to them. And I did the math. 2.1 extra pounds per Tuesday cremation. Approximately 48 to 50 Tuesday cremations per year, accounting for weeks I was closed or had no cremation scheduled. 28 years. 2,800 pounds. The number matched. The total excess weight coming out of my retort on Tuesdays, accumulated over 28 years, was approximately the same as the total amount of calcium hardite my father purchased between 61 and 77. The retort was giving it back. Every Tuesday, a little at a time for 28 years. A compound that was put into bodies that were never cremated in a building that didn't have a crematory when the compound was used, coming out of a machine that was installed 14 years after the last bottle was emptied. And it came on Tuesdays because that's when my father embalmed. I went through his logbooks. He kept them too. Different style, smaller notebooks with blue covers. His prep entries clustered on Tuesdays. Tuesday was his embalming day. He'd pick up from the hospital Monday, let the family make arrangements Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning, and prep Tuesday afternoon, like clockwork, for 33 years. I stood up from the desk, walked through the hallway to the crematory room. It was past midnight. The building was dead quiet, except for the wind outside, that endless panhandle wind. The retort sat against the far wall, cold, the stainless steel door reflecting the overhead fluorescent. The digital temperature display was mounted on the control panel. When the retort is off, it reads ambient room temperature. The processing room usually sat around 68, 69 degrees. I looked at the display, 98.6, human body temperature, on a machine that had been off for 5 hours. I reached out and touched the retort door. Cool to the touch. The metal was cold, but the display read 98.6. I watched it for a minute, maybe two. It didn't flicker. It didn't change. 98.6. I turned off the light, walked out, locked the building. I called the corporate chain in Amarillo the next morning, told them I was ready to sell my cremation contracts and transfer my license. They sent a guy out Thursday. I signed everything by the following Tuesday. I didn't do another cremation on a Tuesday. I didn't do another cremation at all. The new operators are corporate. They use digital records. Weight gets entered into a database automatically from a digital scale, and I don't think anybody looks at the numbers unless there's a complaint. They don't keep handwritten ledgers. They probably don't sort by day of the week. I think about that sometimes. Sitting out here in the dark, whether the Tuesdays are still heavy, whether the retort is still giving back what my father put into the ground, 2.1 pounds at a time, week after week, and whether anybody would ever notice. I ran the numbers one more time at my kitchen table. 2,800 pounds purchased, 2,800 pounds of excess weight over 28 years. The totals matched. But the Kendrick cremation, that last Tuesday, produced 8 extra pounds by itself, not 2.1. 8, which means either the rate was accelerating or it was almost done. I don't know which answer is worse. I still have the ledgers, all 28 of them. Green covers, handwritten entries. I keep them in a box under my bed because they're the only proof any of this happened. Nobody else would ever sort by day of the week. I never checked what day of the week my father died.